Hey, what's up guys? We are back with another behind the scenes video for a music video shoot that we're shooting inside that church behind me. And it's gonna be pretty fun. We're gonna show you guys some behind the scenes of some camera and lighting setups. So let's get into it.
Hey guys, my name is Peter. I'm key grip today.
Hey guys, I'm Hunter. I'm the gaffer on today's shoot. It's gonna be a good day.
When you make a gear, there's no pop rock. No.
On set, you need yourself a couple of dirt bags. You might need to weigh some stuff down.
So we shot this project on the Alexa Mini and the Lomo Super Speeds, but I'm going to dive deeper into the lens choice later in this video, so make sure you watch to the end so you know the ins and outs of why I chose these lenses and why I choose lenses for each project.
So what we're doing right now is we're going to set up our little 8x8 half soft frost diffusion, and we're going to put the artist behind it and backlight them, so then it creates like this kind of moody, silhouette-y, kind of foggy look. We have Peter right here setting up the stands. It's called a goalpost. So what he's going to do, he's going to take this pipe and he's going to goalpost it between the two stands here. So instead of doing a full frame, building the full 8x8 frame, which takes a lot of time, and we don't have as much people on set today, so this is a lot faster of a method to do that. So it's called goalposting. It's called goalpost because it literally looks like a soccer goal. When we build it, you'll see what it actually looks like, but it looks like a soccer goalpost. That's why it's called a goalpost. So now you can start seeing the shape of it starting to look more like a goalpost, and it's a lot more simpler, right? You don't have to build this whole frame. We just have one bar versus four. So it's a lot faster, a lot easier. You know, when you're DP, you got to think about how much manpower or people power I have and how long it takes to do things. So this is a lot faster and we don't have as many people. So it's just the right call. As you know, diffusions come in all different opacities. And this material right here, this half soft frost, you can still see my hand, right? So when we backlight that, you're still gonna be able to see the character, but in a silhouette, and that's kind of the look that we want. And I'll show you the reference right now. Yeah, so this is a great material to do that. It's a little wrinkly, but we're gonna figure that out and make it look really good.
Okay, so we're doing this little backlighty through the opal blurry thing Chris was just talking about. So I'm going ahead and setting the Nova 300 up. What a good lamp op or gaffer will do. They'll kind of think one step ahead and try to get into the mind of the director of photography. So I know that he wants this to be shot to be like completely like silhouette. So he's just gonna be shadows, so just black. The way this light is hitting this, it's spilling onto the walls. So if he's standing here, see the light is bouncing off both of these walls, and it's going to line up the character, and he's no longer going to be in shadow. So we're going to take two flops, and I'm going to take this light off the wall. If you look at me here and you look at this wall, if I go, well, yeah, there we go. So yeah, then we just take it completely off that wall. And because we're shooting in a white room, these walls are super reflective. So yeah, so let's get this set up and come back when the product is finished.
To have the ability to actually control your contrast levels and your exposure levels in your scene, it's so important to be able to flag off your sources to eliminate the bounce that's bouncing around the room, because that bounced light will fill in all the shadows and remove contrast.
Yeah, we got our Nova.
Done this type of shot.
Just bouncing into the wall. The light off the wall is bouncing over here, silhouetting me or the artist as he'll be standing here. I'm just the stand-in. And then we have our janky negative here. It's just taking off the heat from that wall. Just trying to control the light as much as possible. Yeah, and then this fabric is going to have a cool blurry effect on our artist here.
So we had a strobing backlight, and it worked really nicely actually through the diffusion. This song was very chaotic, so having this strobing light and crazy chaotic shutter and stuff really helped with the chaos of the song. Here's me kind of explaining that we needed to wrap the light because it was a little bit too silhouette-y. So we grabbed a Titan tube or a Pavo tube. You can see in this shot that I'm using the pillar to my right as a right sider for the tube. And that's because I just didn't want to give away where the light source was, because if it wasn't there or if I wasn't using that, you would see the tube light just spilling all over the diffusion, and it would give away the source. It would eliminate contrast, and I just practice controlling my light most of the time just because it allows me to have more control over my contrast. You can also see that we're using very chaotic handheld because it really fits the essence of the raw and chaotic feeling of the song.
Yes.
Dude, this looks wild. Bro.
We're gonna put some baby oil around the edges of this 8mm fisheye, and it's gonna look nuts. It's an EF lens on this, but you know, that's how you make things look cool. You put weird lenses on cameras. So I'm gonna quickly give you guys a tutorial on using the light meter because you guys have been commenting how to use this thing. So basically, I set my camera to whatever settings I want. You know, you have your shutter angle, your ISO, and all these in your aperture, and all those elements do totally different things to your camera. It makes your image look completely different. So I set my camera to how I want it to be. I set my aperture to what I want it to be. I set my shutter angle to what I want it to be, and my frame rate and all that. And then I put those settings into my light meter. I have 800 ISO, I have 360 shutter angle, and then 23 frames per second. And my aperture is 3.5. So now what I do is, one method of measuring light is I'm going to go take light meter readings of these lights, and I'm going to try to get 3.5 from this light, because light is measured in T-stops or f-stops, you know, stops of light, and my lens is at 3.5. So I know that I need to get at least 3.5, T3.5 from all my light sources. So then I go and I measure the source. I go like that, press the button.
That's the breathe in, FYI.
And then I get 3.6, and that's close enough. It'll be a little bit over, but not that much. It's very micro hair, but you could fine tune it to the fraction if you wanted to. It just allows you to be as accurate as possible with it. So it's very cool.
There's kind of a rule of thumb when it comes to lighting and what to light first. A lot of people are, you know, concerned with, you know, lighting someone's face, giving that nice soft wrap. And when you show up on set, you might be like, okay, what do we light first? But something that Chris always does, something that I always do, something that Peter always does, always light the room first is typically a good rule of thumb. Because if your room is lit like garbage, your shot's going to look like garbage. You could have a room lit really nice, and the light's bouncing around, and your character will actually kind of just fall into the scene much more naturally. And you might even find that, hey, this subject doesn't even need much light. Maybe just like bring in a tube just for a little like push, just to separate them from the background a little bit more. But there's a lot of instances where you could light a room with big lights through windows, and the light bounces around nice enough that you might actually not even need to bring in any extra lights for your character. Ended up happening here. We're just shooting through these windows with the Aputure 1200D and the 600D. We are blasting those through the windows and pulled the camera up, and we're like, oh, this looks great. Don't need to bring any extra lighting in. Maybe if we go in for some close-ups, then we'll bring in like maybe a tube or something, just to get some extra separation from the background.
Okay, so we made this setup very simple. We got one light. It's a 1200D coming through this window, and we added some haze. It's all about being simple, being minimalistic, and making it look really good. We have this beautiful texture here. I always talk about texture and locations. We have this wood here. We got the stained glass, or plastic. So yeah, we wanted this shot to be a little bit more contrasty, so we had just one light coming through the window, and that was just going to be basically a backlight or a side key light, depending on where the camera is going to be in position to the, you know, the actor or the artist. And then this room has tons of texture. You can see on the ceiling, you can see on the walls, all this wood, you know, even the texture on the windows. All of that adds so much value to the shot. It creates so much more interest to the eye. If we just had like this wall was just all white walls, it would just be so boring. The light would be bouncing everywhere, and it just wouldn't look too good. So having all this texture just really makes a massive difference in your frames. And then we added some haze just to texture it up to see the light, and you call that volumetric lighting, where when you add haze to the light, you see just all that texture. You see where the light is hitting. It's just this beautiful beam of light, and you need to use hard light to achieve that. When you soften the light, just doesn't look as defined as hard light coming in. The beam of light was already kind of hard to see because there's this kind of like plasticky diffusion on the window already, but there's such a concentrated source that you can still see the beam of light. So you need a really concentrated source, and just cutting it through like a window and stuff will give you that beam of light. So let's go check out the lights, guys. By the way, Aputure, please sponsor me. We're using all of your lights all the time. So we chose to use the Aputure lights instead of like ARRI lights or sky panels or any other kind of brands of lights, just because that these lights are LED to start with, so they're so super power efficient. We can just plug them into like house power and we won't have any problems with like, you know, the breaker board or anything like that. So power distribution is really easy. Don't need generators. LED is awesome for that, especially on these budget videos. LED is going to be your friend. I do love using HMIs, and if you see my previous videos, I do talk about using HMIs. I've used 18Ks and all of that, and those lights are amazing. But you got to pick your battles as a cinematographer. You got to know the budgets and you got to know the scale of it, because if you're bringing in, like, let's say a huge HMI light to this kind of budget shoot, you just won't have the manpower for it. It takes so much time to set that up, and it would cost a lot of money. So you got to pick your tools appropriately for the project. So we picked Aputure LEDs. They're just great workhorses, and I've been a huge fan of the 1200D and the 600D. So yeah, that's why I chose the Aputures. Sponsor us.
You know, it's always good to have tools on you. I got my light meter, got 20 clamps, got my keep taps, got my tester here, and
So because we're using a drone, we have to light this really well, which is why it's really useful that we have these two lights. They're full pop right now, and the room is lit up right now, which is really great because we have gels on them, and gels tend to cut down the quality and the quantity of light quite significantly, because we are at half CTO right now, or I believe we're at high sodium, so it's actually even more, we're losing even more light per light. So we're getting enough power out of each one right now to give us enough light in the room, which is going to save the scene right now with the FPV drone at least. So full pop basically means 100%. Everything else we're just talk by percentages. You might hear Chris ask for a stop, and if you know how stops works, it basically means 2 times the light or half the light, right? So if I'm at 20% and Chris is asking me for an extra stop, I have to double it, so I go to 40%. And if he asks me to take away a stop, then I divide by 2. So that's usually how we communicate. You know, we understand how T stops and F stops work, and especially with the light meter, Chris can tell me exactly how many stops that he needs, so I can dial it in. He doesn't need to go keep going. Like, he could just say, give me 2 stops, and I give him 2 stops, and we're perfect.
Okay, so once again, very simple lighting setup here. We got our lights pushing through this window, both windows here, just one source lighting, right? So we're going back to the same theory of one source lighting. We're just bringing in light coming through the windows here. Some beautiful sodium vapor just to kind of accent all the warm tones that's happening inside this location. And then we just have 2 pavo tubes up inside those little upper areas, and a bunch of candles to create some highlights and to create some exposure in this place, because it looks really dark. So it helps keep that contrasting moody look, but just adding little pops of highlights, because I always talk about that, guys. Pops of highlights really draw people's attention into your frame and looks really good. So that's where we got our highlights. We got it in the candles, got it up there, and then the windows, obviously. There used to be 2 lights in that window, but they're coming to this side because we're turning around right now in the scene. So lights are kind of shuffling over, but that's the lighting setup. It's pretty simple. So a lot of people overcomplicate lighting, like way too much. They start adding lights here and there, and then they look at their monitor and they're like, why does this look super flat and gross? Well, that's because they're not taking the minimalist approach and thinking about lighting as like a realistic concept. So if you look at the world, light comes usually from one source. Yeah, you could argue light comes from lamps and all these other sources, but most of the time it's from one big source. Your key light is from one big source. So that's how I like to look at it. I add a fill light if I feel like there needs to be more data or information in the shadows, or a creative choice. But for most of the time, I just start with my biggest, brightest source, which is my key light, and I work my way from there. But usually I'm like, that looks pretty darn good with just that one source, the one key light source, because when I start overcomplicating it, it starts to flatten out. I used to do that when I first started. I would overcomplicate lighting way too much, because we all start somewhere, and I would start adding lights. I'd be like, oh, is this enough? And I didn't take the moment to actually think about what I was doing. I didn't take the moment to think about, okay, where's my key light coming from? Where is it in correspondence to my camera? And these things really matter. If you just look at where your camera is and then move your light corresponding to that, that's gonna be a game changer. Because like I always say, guys, shoot on the dark side, shoot on the shadow side, and then where your camera is, just move the light in correspondence to that. So you start seeing shadows, so it looks more three-dimensional, looks really good, more cinematic. And yeah, it's once you get the hang of it, it starts getting easy. And then, then you get hit with some other tough parts where it's like lighting big scenes with hundreds of characters or things like that. But, start with the basics, learn how to work with one source lighting, because you can get truly beautiful images from just one source and not overcomplicating it. So yeah, that's one source lighting, baby. Hunter just saved me here. We were, this area was a little underexposed, and Hunter had a really great idea, and he put our tube lights just to raise it up a little bit. Oh, hey, Hunter, actually, maybe we could make it more mesh, so maybe it's that on the back ones, so, because there's no...
Oh, you're right.
But, it's all about collaborating. That looks sick like that.
I'm just resting it on top of the lights are arguably one of the best things you could have in your lighting kit, because you might have an area in the room that's like dark and you need a light that you can hide super easy that's like battery powered. So yeah, NAND lights are the most popular industry standard tubes are Titan tubes. You'll find Titan tubes on like every single set.
Doing this because when the haze comes out of the haze machine, it's very, I guess the word you can call it, it's very coagulated, like it's all bunched up. So we don't want you to know that there's smoke in the room. Like you shouldn't be able to see all the swirlies. That's why we try to disperse it, because if it's even in the room, you won't tell that there's haze in the room, but you still see the effects of the haze creating beams of light, right? So we don't want you to see the smoke. So we want you to see the effect of the smoke, but we don't want you to see the smoke. So we have to kind of waft it out a little bit just to make sure it fills the room a little bit.
So we're using the Lomo Super Speeds today, and the reason for that is because, like I said in the last video, I love up lenses because it adds a unique style and flavor to your shots. A really cool thing about these Lomos, they were created, I think, between the 40s and onward, and then they were discontinued after the Soviet Union. And a very unique thing about them is they have their iris on the front of the lens. Usually lenses have irises at the back elements, and because of this, it creates very unique flaring, very unique softness to it, and it just has a really beautiful, I guess you could say vintage look, but a really soft look to it. And they're really fast, they're 1.5. I really wanted to start the style of shooting on lenses that had a lot of characteristics and created a new style that you wouldn't have seen from other cinematographers, just to kind of set myself apart. And that's why I bought these lenses, because not a lot of people were shooting on them. They just look so gorgeous. They have such beautiful skin rendering on, skin and stuff like that, because it's so soft. So I love these lenses, they're great. Everybody loves talking about lenses like, oh, what's the sharpest lens? Like what's the flawless lens? But when you get into, I guess, like into cinematography and into filmmaking and, into these different leagues, you start looking for things with characteristics. You don't want things that are seamless, sharp. I mean, yeah, it obviously depends on the story and the style. You're going to go for lenses and camera packages that are going to give you a lot of style, a lot of characteristic. Don't necessarily listen to the people out there that are saying you need the sharpest lens, you need this and that. Like, comes down to the story in the end of the day, and it comes down to what you think looks good. So it doesn't have to be the sharpest lens, it doesn't have to be, the most flawless lens, it doesn't even have to be the most messed up looking lens. It's just whatever you think looks good, and play around with it. I highly recommend experimenting with lenses. I didn't do that sooner, and I wish I did, because there's so many beautiful lenses out there, and they're kind of like the paintbrush to your canvas. They all create a different style. They all create a different brush stroke. So highly recommend trying out different lenses. You can just go to a local rental house and just ask them, throw it on your DSLR, throw it on whatever, and just test them out. See what you like and what you think is cool, because they all are very different and they all have a lot of things to offer. So yeah, that's lenses. The lens masterclass. So you can just go there. We're going to track from this way first, do all this stuff first, and then when we turn around, we'll bring, we'll bring the Nova. So you can chill with the Nova. Yeah. Because when we turn around, we'll move the one case to the other window. Pretty freaking sweet. Very tired.
Always have your scrim bag next to the light and don't leave it on the ground, because if you leave it on the ground, some random lamp bob is just going to pick it up and put it back in stash when it should be living on the stand somewhere. Always.
The way I was told is a lamp without a scrim bag is a lamp pop without a job.
So yeah, they were just setting up the one case through this window just to create some illumination in that window, and this was one of our last scenes. Genki's changing the lens, those old Lomo lenses that are just so funky, and here's us adding some chaotic handheld to the shots just because the song was so raw, so chaotic, like I mentioned before.
We just wrapped. We're done. It's midnight, and we're done. If you guys enjoyed this video, hey Peter, subscribe to my channel. I will see you guys in the next video. This is Phillip behind the scenes, guys. He's shooting all the great videos. He's checking out and mind blown about these lenses. Wow. What do you think about these lenses?
Because you said iris is in the front, and then when I'm touching it, because as a consumer-based lens user, it is so different.
It's so different, right? Yeah, exactly. It's trippy, hey?